Yo, G's crazy, dog. Got me calling in anonymous tips and shit.
Sound familiar.
So you know Vladimir misconnect Milan, right? He needs my help to get out from under. I think he's scared, B.
Yo, I seen him scared before. That ain't good for nobody. Watch your back.
He's dead.
Right.
Period. And there is more story to tell.
More story to tell when it comes to the character of Ghost. Those were Courtney Kemp's words when she was on the Crew Has It podcast. And with 18 episodes for the first season for Power Origins, there is a lot of story that does need to be told. Just like this story when Kanan mentions he's seen Ghost scared before. So what does it take to rattle someone like James St. Patrick? Someone who always liked to be in control over his emotions, his moves, be 3 steps ahead, whether it be his destiny, his businesses, his family, his relationships, or various battles that he had in the streets. How many times did we hear Ghost mention the words, "I've got this, I'm in control, I know what I'm doing," even when he was drunk?
I haven't seen you like this in years.
I went to a bar last night to do some research. I'm in control, Tasha.
So, what does it take to spook someone like Ghost? One name, Milan. In Power, we saw Ghost completely spooked for the first time when Milan revealed himself being under Ghost's nose the entire time, disguised as Dean the security guard. But that's not the untold secret. We already know what spooked him in Power and why. The untold secret and backstory is what spooked Ghost back in the day when he was younger. Kanan mentioned that he's seen Ghost scared before, and that it wasn't good for anyone. He even took a step back during the whole Milan situation because he's seen the script before. He knows what's happened. He knew how Ghost would behave because of whatever happened in the past. Kanan knew, but we didn't. And we still won't know until we watch Power Origins. And that's the topic of today's breakdown. I've now finished my rewatch of Power, and when this scene came around, it was one which was high up on the list because it made me remember what Courtney Kemp said on the Crew Has It podcast. There's more story to tell. So there is a lot to unpack when it comes to Ghost Psych, and a side to Ghost which we didn't see often. A side which was flustered, confused, not in control, a vulnerable side, and also a drunk side. More on that later on. So stick with this video right through to the very end, because we will be speculating a few scenarios that could have played out to spook Ghost when he was younger. But first, let's take a look at what actually happened with Milan. Let's understand Ghost Psych a little more, his relationship with Kanan, and then we'll get to Ghost's backstory in Power Origins. Now, Ghost was someone who was mainly calm in his fights. He was strategic. He never let his emotions take over any kind of decision making. He'd never make any rash decisions or quick decisions. He always took a step back. And even if he did need a bit of advice or help, we did see him approach Tasha once or twice. Sometimes us as humans, we do need help. We can't be perfect all the time and we can't do everything on our own. We're not robots. But with the early battles with the likes of Kanan, Felipe Lobos, and even business battles with those guys across the street of Truth, or when he had a real fight on his hands to get his club back from Simon Stern, he always thought a few moves ahead. He was calm, always believed that he had the belief that his time would come, and when it does, that's when he's gonna pounce. He'd lose a few battles, but eventually he'd win the war. He also had a saying which was one of my favourites from Power: sometimes the best response is no response.
Sometimes no response is the best response. So we're not gonna make a move. Not right now, Andre. They'd be expecting it. We'll let them wait in fear.
Now, I'm not saying he was perfect, far from it. He definitely made a few mistakes, but what Ghost was, he was very calculated in his approach, strategic. He was in control even when you thought or others thought he wasn't. For example, at the end of season 2, Tommy was arrested along with Felipe Lobos, but Ghost always had a plan. Behind the scenes, he was always putting the moves in motion to make sure when step 2, 3, 4 came around, he was ready. In this instance, with the help of Joe Proctor and kind of Angela Valdez, he played the chess game very well.
You knew I was following you. I played right into your hand.
And I gave you Lobos for your troubles. But you can't have Tommy.
And that's why I make reference to chess in my breakdowns. You always have to think ahead, and that's what Ghost did in this particular example. But with Milan, this is something he never had control over because this is something he didn't see coming. With his fights with Kanan, Felipe Lobos and Simon Stern, he could see his enemy, he knew who they were and where they were, but with Milan, he had no idea that he'd infiltrated his entire life. This is someone who not only got into his place of business, he got into his home. He also took Ghost's business partner and brother in Tommy. He started manipulating Tommy against Ghost. But the most important thing that Milan did was, he got into Ghost's mind. This is something that not many people could do in Power. Just have a look at Ghost's reaction when we saw Milan in the middle of Club Truth take out one of his Primeras. He killed his Primera like it was nothing, and this was Ghost's reaction.
Man, what the fuck was that? What's going on, Tommy? A pre-meta meeting in truth, and then off shit in the middle of the club?
Ghost definitely was spooked. And if you don't have control over your mind and your emotions, then you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes in the street game, with your family, with Tommy, and also with your club business. He even started to lose his Karen Bassett deals because Milan really got into his mind. Ghost started to lose the bigger picture. He took one eye off Tariq and had Dre look over him, and that's when Kanan got to him. Whereas you look at his previous battles where we spoke about with Kanan, Felipe Lobos, Simon Stern, even though he did feel the pressure in those fights, even though there were moments where things weren't kind of going his way, he never lost control over his emotions or his mind. He never let those opponents get into his mind, and that's one of the key differences. With Milan, Ghost wasn't the same Ghost we knew from seasons 1 and 2. Milan was really toying with Ghost. He had him spooked. He was spooked because he never saw it coming, and he couldn't do anything about it in that moment. He was so busy dealing with Felipe Lobos and everything else, he failed to see what was right in front of him the entire time. So, by the time he realized, Ghost was genuinely lost with what to do next. Milan had come into his home, with Tatiana by the way, who was also working for Ghost. That's another way he played and toyed with Ghost emotions. But he came into his home and indirectly threatened his family. He'd taken Tommy away and he was beginning to really turn the screw. He was inside Ghost's club, he knew his movements, his structure, his routine. He studied it all while he was watching over Ghost for the time he was protecting him. For the first time in Power, Ghost was scared, and Dre saw that.
I think he's scared, B. Yo, I seen him scared before. That ain't good for nobody. Watch your back.
Now we all know Kanan and Ghost grew up together. Nobody knew Ghost better than the likes of Tommy and Kanan. Think about the friends that you guys have, the friends that you've known for 10, 15, 20 years. You know their characteristics, you know how they're going to react to certain things, because some things just never change. Well, the same with Kanan and Ghost. In that particular moment, with that phone call between Kanan and Dre, he gave us an insight into Ghost's character that we didn't know before, and something that we hadn't seen from Ghost up until that point. Details of something that happened before when they were younger, just like Kanan mentioned before, more story to tell. Something spooked and scared Ghost, and it gave Kanan a reminder that it ain't good for anyone. When Ghost was in this state, he warned Dre to watch his back. That's why during that period when Ghost was dealing with Milan, Kanan took a step back. He thought, nuh-uh, I ain't going nowhere near him at this moment in time. I'm just gonna watch the show from afar, because I know what Ghost is like when he gets spooked. There's no way I'm getting in the middle of that crazy Seb and Ghost at this moment in time. I've got Dre on the inside giving me info. I'm good watching from where I am. Again, you're talking about Ghost's former mentor. Even though Kanan was a huge liar in Power, and we couldn't trust everything that came out of his mouth, his observations around Ghost's character does carry some credibility, because in that moment, there really was no reason for him to lie, and he was proven to be right. Ghost was spooked. Dre sent him a text a bit later on, and he confirmed exactly what Kanan said. So, if Kanan, who knows Ghost better than anyone, is worried about a spooked Ghost, what does that tell us about his past? Power Origins definitely needs to explore all angles when it comes to Ghost's backstory and history. They 100% need to dive deep into his entire history, psych, what he went through, the history in terms of him getting spooked in the past, which then makes his body language, decisions, and mindset make sense for the Milan arc in Power. Origins is the perfect opportunity to explore this particular reference, along with the others that we've spoken about over the past few months. Kanan's comment isn't just a throwaway line, it's a deliberate nod to a defining moment in Ghost's youth that shaped him. We need to understand Ghost's complexities, because he was a complex character. How did he become the man who strives for so much power and control? But the minute Milan came around, that was kind of just undone in the blink of an eye. So again, I'm gonna ask you guys a question. What was it about Ghost's past that Kanan knows so well? Why did Kanan know that this was a scared Ghost where he warned Dre to watch his back? Let's take a look at some general scenarios that could actually play out in Power Origins that would actually make this make sense. Number 1. The death of Curtis St. Patrick. Now this is something we learned about towards the end of season 6 in the conversation between Ghost and Uncle Gabe. Kanan did go into detail about this part of Ghost's backstory in an interview, and I'm just going to play you exactly what she said.
Ghost had a mom and a dad who she was a nurse, and his father ran a jazz club, which is the club that you walk into, and he ran it with Uncle Gabe. Uncle Gabe is not an actual blood uncle. It's, you know, we all have those. So, and then the dad starts drinking, which is where Ghost gets that, the alcohol and drink from, and mom left. And so he was being raised by his dad alone at that time. So then we've got, as Ghost started to kind of hang out with the drug folk, and what we couldn't push was that Uncle Gabe knew the name Kanan. Because I think that would have been pushing it too far. But like the older boy who was recruiting he and Tommy into the drug game, you guys know who that was. That was Kanan, right? So there's a little bit intimated there that whoever Kanan was running with didn't want Ghost's actual dad pulling him back out of the life. And so when Ghost's father whose name is Curtis, I don't know if you guys noticed that, but his name is Curtis. Ghost's father. Yeah. So Curtis called the cops on these drug kids one too many times, and they killed him.
Now, this is something I came across on Instagram on a page called Elite TV. So shout out to those guys who run that particular page. I will link them down below in the description section. Now, with this bit of backstory that Corny Kemp gave, I just want to run off on a bit of a side thought. She mentioned that Ghost got his drinking habit from his father, and this was alluded to back in Power. So, let's just take it back to a clip I played for you before.
I haven't seen you like this in years. Tommy, Ghost is plotting something against Milan, and he's fucking drinking again. Call me back.
It was hinted at Ghost having a drinking problem before. Tasha mentioned that she hadn't seen Ghost like this in many years, and mentioned to Tommy that Ghost had been drinking again. It's also worth mentioning that Corny Kemp's original plan for Power was to introduce Ghost as a recovering alcoholic before they switched things up, although it does look like they kind of kept that part of their still in Ghost's backstory, and this is one to keep an eye on for when he's younger. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we do see him drinking, if we do see him going a little off the rails during a tough period. That's something I'm sure the writers do have in mind. But this part of Ghost's backstory is arguably one of the most important. It's the most important where he loses the only person that he had left. Maybe he felt guilty, some sort of remorse that he couldn't stop what happened, because I did get the sense from his body language in season 6 episode 10, and the lack of him actually saying anything to Uncle Gabe quite telling in Power. I don't know whether it was just me, but I did feel like Ghost knew more than he was letting on, or telling Uncle Gabe in that moment. In my particular opinion, he definitely does know more. Maybe a young Ghost could have controlled that situation better, or maybe he did something that initially caused those kids to come around and cause trouble. Maybe it was retaliation for something Ghost did, who knows. This backstory that Corny Kemp gave is quite brief, and it is a backstory they can still alter and change, because it's not set in stone. It's not a backstory that was actually given in Power, so they don't actually necessarily need to stick with it in Power Origins. They can change it and sway away from it. But maybe this was the moment that potentially scared Ghost. Or when Ghost found out who killed his pops, he wanted revenge. He did mention that Kanan was there for him when his pops died. Maybe they went to get revenge together. Maybe that's when Kanan saw Ghost scared and spooked for the first time. I've speculated before whether Kanan and Breeze actually had something to do with Ghost's father's death, and that theory definitely is still plausible. We do have to keep that in mind, but this definitely is one of the scenarios that could have seen Ghost scared, and where Kanan first saw that side to Ghost. This is where a young Ghost might have lost his mind a little after his father's death, or after he retaliated. Now number 2, it could have been someone else, another family member or a friend. At this moment in time, we actually have no idea who else was connected to Ghost. He definitely is going to have a few more close friends that he grew up with. We don't know much about his family or his mom apart from what Corny Kemp mentioned. Did he lose someone else? Which actually brings me to number 3. What really happened with his mom? Apparently she left them when Ghost was young, but it doesn't mean that she didn't reappear in his life a bit later on. We saw how Tommy's relationship was with Kate. It was very toxic to say the least, and it still is in Power Book 4 Force. We learned how Effie's mom only ever came around when she needed something. We saw Joyce Thomas appear when she needed money. And who's to say Ghost's mom never reappeared in his life when she needed something? What if something happened with his mom that had him scared or spooked? This situation around Ghost being scared or spooked could be a number of things or tied to anyone. The writers really do have free reign to take it wherever they want. So number 4, it could be something to do with a betrayal in the streets. Very similar to the Milan situation. Ghost could have been trusting too much in someone and could have been blindsided. Maybe he retaliates and makes a dangerous mistake. We know how much Kanan messed up in the early parts of Raising Kanan. Just have a look at how many bodies dropped when he cooked up the bad batch of coke. Look at what happened with D-Wiz because he decided to go after Buck 20. Look at him accusing Scrappy of being the snitch when it was actually him outing Rock Stash House to Davina, who in turn told Unique. It was mistake after mistake with the early Kanan. With Ghost, he's definitely going to be making a lot of mistakes in the early parts of Power Origins, no doubt. This ain't going to be the same smooth criminal that we saw at the beginning of Power, far from it. So maybe it's a mistake, a retaliation that's gone wrong, a hit that's gone wrong, Maybe he murdered someone by mistake who he wasn't supposed to, where he then actually needs Kanan and Breeze to help him clean up his mess, just like Rox had to do countless of times for Kanan in Raising Kanan. That's another scenario that I can see playing out, which could have Ghost spooked, and where Kanan starts to see this version of Ghost which isn't in control. A moment where Kanan probably puts his arm around his shoulder to kind of help him, but also manipulate him at the same time, because that's when Ghost would be at his most vulnerable. It goes back to not being in control over your mind. When you're not thinking straight, when you're thinking with anger, people can easily manipulate you. A recent example, the way Kanan has been manipulated by Snaps and Pop. I'd say at this moment in time, Snaps and Pop are preying on Kanan's vulnerability. So coming back to the Milan arc, he didn't just outsmart Ghost, he tapped into this very rare vulnerability from Ghost. This vulnerability that Kanan's seen before. We don't exactly know what scared Ghost, but Kanan's warning does tell us this is a story worth telling. So the floor is now yours. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think spooked Ghost back in the day. Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.